If you choose to become an archer in Dragon Age the Veilguard, there's a lot to learn, and more importantly, there's also a lot of mistakes you can make, so this video should help you to not make those mistakes and in the end, increase the damage against your enemies. Now, before we jump into the nitty gritty of the numbers, let me explain very quickly here how I did the testing. I removed all the items which will give me a perk. I made sure that I only run around with gray bows, which no perks attached to it. I removed all the skills, all the skill points, and also made sure that all the runes I have slotted, because you cannot just remove them, will not interfere with the damage I'm doing. And also very important, there are two sorts of bows in the game. There's the longbow and the shortbow. And they're different bows. Now, the longbow is definitely the slow, heavy hitter, while the shortbow is shooting a little bit faster and is also giving you a little bit more abilities to evade certain attacks, but we will talk about that in detail later on. But there is a difference between those two bows, and it is important to know that. Now, let's talk about damage. How does this work? Well, frankly speaking, it's actually pretty simple. You're opening up your inventory, and the number you can see on the left side when you are hovering over with the mouse and you see two-handed, that's a bow, right? That's the damage you will probably do to the enemy. And I say probably because there is some calculation going on when you hit an enemy. Calculation you do not see, you just see the outcome with the damage number popping up. But one of the biggest calculations which are happening, and you always have to keep in mind, are the resistances enemies have. Like they all have different percentage numbers against, like, well, different damage types. And yes, physical resistance or physical damage is one of those damage types. So they are enemies which will take more physical damage, and they are then enemies again which will take less physical damage. Okay, how do I know what enemy does what? Well, I haven't really run the calculation on all the different enemy types because that would be, well, a different video. But the best tip I can give you here is just go with the numbers on your screen. They're actually super accurate, right? They're becoming bigger and brighter when you are doing it right, and they're becoming darker and smaller when you are using an attack where the enemy is pretty much resistant against. So you want to change it up when you realize, oh, that number was barely readable. What happened there? Well, change up your attack. That's the easiest way to go with this. Now, the next thing we have to talk about is ammunition. Very important. Without ammo, well, you're not shooting a bow, right? So, without any stats, without any boosts, it takes 40 seconds to recharge 8 arrows. 8 is the default number. This is in battle. I didn't test outside of battle because it doesn't matter. But in the battle, it takes 40 seconds. And the good news, it makes no difference between the longbow and the shortbow. Right? They have the same regeneration speed. Now, what happens if you were picking up an item which gives you 50% extra ammo regeneration? It will cut down the number by 50%. So you will end up with 26.6 seconds on the regeneration timer. Oh, so wait, what happens if I'm taking another item which gives me another 50%? Does that stack? Does it do anything? Yes, it will, again, cut the number by 50%, which is now 20 seconds. So 100% more ammo rack is cutting down the 40 seconds down to 20. And this is why I'm not necessarily recommending to go beyond the 50%. Like the first 50% ammo rack is pretty big, right? From 40 to 26.6. And the second one is already there with a diminishing return. And going on even beyond that number doesn't seem to make a great difference in the end, because this leads us to our next point. Should you fan your arrows, or should you charge up your bow? And the TLDR here is charge up the bow, always, whenever you can. And this is why you don't really need a lot of ammo regeneration, because when you are charging up your bow, your ammo is still recharging in the background, right? And you should have enough arrows in those fights, and you should never really run out with more arrows, more ammo rack, and you should have enough. And this is why 100% doesn't really do the difference, because you are not hammering the right click. Shooting your arrows is not doing a lot of damage. But let me give you some numbers. So when I'm doing a normal shot without charging, I would do 106 damage at the enemy. If I'm doing the same thing without targeting any weak spots and would charge the shot with the short bow, I would do 383 damage. That's a huge jump in the damage number. And keep in mind, if you are fast, you can shoot 2 arrows in 1 second. But that still wouldn't be enough, right? That's 212 damage in a second against 383 damage in a second. Okay, so that means the charged shot is always better? Yes, always. There is, of course, a downside here. Keep in mind that when you are charging up, you are zooming in, you see less, and you are also walking slower. So you better make sure that nothing is attacking you when you are charging up. But it gets even more insane when you are now starting to hit weak spots, which, by the way, are mostly heads. When you are just using a normal shot, you would do 161 weak spot damage, while a charged up bow or a charged up arrow will do 624 damage. That's the damage difference we are talking about. And yes, I'm aware you have to do 161 times 2, because you can shoot 2 arrows in a second. But still, that doesn't even get remotely close to the charged up weak spot damage. And this is why I say, always go with a charged up shot when you can, and you are not under like big AoE attacks or something by the enemy. Now, the last thing we have to talk about is one particular talent, which is giving you an extra charge, right? And that sounds really enticing, that talent, right? It's like, ooh, an extra charge. That means even more damage. Oh my gosh, that is amazing. Yeah. And this is not quite true, because we also have to talk about something which sets the longbow and the shortbow apart. It's not the amount of charges they have, well, not only, right? The longbow is starting with 2 charges, while the shortbow is only starting with 1, and then they're getting additionally 1 on top of that. We are talking about the charge up times. You might have noticed that I only talked about the shortbow, and that the shortbow takes 1 second to fill up a bar. The longbow takes 1.35 seconds to charge up a shot. That means for the longbow, you are much longer in a vulnerable state. And the moment you are now starting to have an additional charge up, that means for the shortbow, it takes 2 seconds, right? That's still doable. That doesn't put you too much on the spot. It's not great, but you take it for the damage trade-off, right? But the longbow now takes 4 seconds to charge up the 3 bars. And you might see it in the video, but I'm already struggling here with the short bow and with just 1 or 2 charge ups. 3 charge ups with 4-second timer? No thanks. Like, you better make damn sure that you have the time to do it that you're not getting interrupted, that you are hitting the weak spot, and more importantly, you don't miss. So that's the good thing with a short bow. The short bow gives you a lot more leeway to make mistakes, to move when you have to, and the damage drop off is not that severe because, well, you are charging up very quickly. With the longbow, though, every time you cannot utilize the full charge up, you're wasting damage. And that can happen more often than you think. So, personally, I like the short bow a little bit more because it gives you more freedom than the longbow. But if you can set it up, of course, the longbow damage is much, much higher. And I do not recommend the talent with the longbow. 4 seconds is too long. It is far too long, especially you charge up for 4 seconds, you shoot, the enemy dodges, and that whole damage just goes into nothingness. It's infuriating, and it's really bad for your damage. So again, highly not recommend doing that. Leave that talent alone if you are using a longbow or you are just an aim god. But then, of course, you can do that, no problem. But I think that most people aren't. And it really comes down in the end to which of the two bows you like the most and which work for you in particular. But I really came to like the short bow because it is much more versatile and gives you much more leeway for the charged up shots. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If it was helpful, please leave a like. And also, if you want to see more Dragon Age the Veilguard guides and other RPGs and survivor games, you came to the right place, and you might want to subscribe to the channel. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe. Bye-bye.